Welcome to the Scott Townsend Show, brought to you by Dietzo Man Productions.
Hey, this is Scott Townsend. Welcome back to the Scott Townsend Show. A lot of times I like to have guests on that are motivating, inspiring. If you're listening or watching, you can learn something from them. In my LinkedIn group, a lot of you guys are in oil and gas, and so all kinds of businesses, really. There's a lot of information that I like to bring to you guys to help with, how to live a better life, how to live a better professional life. And there's all kinds of ways to do that. And so I try to have guests on who can help us do that. People who have written books, who have overcome obstacles or know how to motivate and inspire and lead. Last week we had Keith Clark with us. He wrote his goal is to go around America in this year. And so the first leg of his trip was from Bartlesville to Scottsdale, Arizona. We talked about that. And then last week I had him on, posted that interview, and he's going from Scottsdale to Woodlands, Washington. So that's cool. Big goal there for him to drive on his motorcycle, on his BMW motorcycle around the United States. Today I have with me a guest who is motivating, inspiring. I talk to ordinary people leading extraordinary lives in extraordinary ways. And my guest today, his story is overcoming, persevering, living against all odds, probably having wanted to give up on probably more than one occasion, not giving up, and probably knocking on death's door closer than he had wanted to a time or two. Maybe I'll let him go into that. So he serves as an inspiration, and I'm sure you'll be inspired by his story. Welcome to the show, Jim Mueller.
Thank you, Scott. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate it.
Hey, you bet. So Jim's got an interesting story. We'll get right to it. Jim, why are you on the show? Why are we talking?
Thanks, Scott. Well, in some ways it's pretty simple, but I was born in 1962, which is a long time ago, with a genetic illness called hemophilia. And only about 20,000, primarily males in the United States, actually have the disease at one time. And when I was born, it was a very serious, still is a very serious illness, but it was very challenging, and it presented some real obstacles and some real challenges. I remember one of my most difficult times that I had to overcome, and certainly wanted to give up during those times. And you asked me a wonderful question last time, what kept you from doing that? And I've been thinking a lot about that. But I just want to share briefly, when I was about 14, I'd grown up with pains and joint bleeds, which back then weren't very treatable. And that's just get blood into a joint or a muscle from overexertion, or if you were to sprain something, it would stop bleeding right away for you, or pretty close to right away. Yes.
So to stop real quick, so hemophilia, so this is the condition where you have a hard time stopping bleeding. Blood clotting doesn't happen, or in some degrees doesn't happen, some more severe than others, I guess.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah.
So once you start to bleed, then I guess it's hard to get it to stop.
In my case, very hard. In my brother's case, and in other severe hemophiliacs, very challenging. As a matter of fact, sometimes the pressure in the joint would basically stop the bleeding. It had nowhere else to go. And it was very painful. It was very painful. And at that time in high school, I wanted to fit in like everybody, be popular. And I decided to be the manager of the football team. because I thought that would make me fit in or help me fit in with what I thought were the cool people at that time.
Right.
And my dad had played ball in college, and it was a way. I enjoyed it, and I felt like I was fitting in. But I picked up a ball bag to bring it in from the field. That was one of my responsibilities. And I felt a little tear or a pain in my abdominal region, and I had torn a muscle that many hemophiliacs tear, but about 12 hours later, I was downtown Oklahoma City in the emergency room at what was then Presbyterian Hospital. And for me, it was excruciating pain and bleeding to the point I had irregular heartbeats and other signs of bleeding, internal bleeding. And at the time, there wasn't much I could take to help me with that, to start the blood clotting. And that happened again and again and again for about a 6-month period. I'd rehab, get back, go ahead.
Same kind of tear in the same location and
exact same location.
Okay.
Yeah. And it took me, I was laying flat on my back much of the time in the hospital, and it took me maybe 3 weeks to recover, to get back to school, to get back to trying to live life. And every time that I would, or the 3 times that I did that, it rebled. And that's not uncommon for people that have hemophilia, or for all of us. We re-injure ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, mine progressed to that serious condition. And I found it very, very difficult. I felt like God was against me, that there was no God. How could he let this happen to me or to anybody else? I spent time on what's called a pediatric oncology and hematology floor. And I have a dear friend that's helped me try to put together an effective message. And one of the things I so remember is so many of the kids were pale with no hair back then, and their families were in distress, and they were in distress. We were all anxious. We were all sad, most of us. And that's when I would get so angry and so down on God. I'd be like, how the hell could this happen in a loving world? And I did recover, and I did have times where I had a couple of doctors. It's tough at 14 to have them come in and say, you're very sick. You may not make it. I don't know if that was their exact words, but that was what I took from it. And I think they told my parents that. So it's a challenging time for everybody, every family member and every person in my family. And it certainly hardened me, and certainly to overcome it was a challenge. You have to rehab and you have to get well again. But I persevered. I graduated from high school, and I wish I would have spent more time not worrying about being on the being a football manager, and a little more time being popular, a little more time taking care of myself and doing what I really wanted. Yeah, I think all of it, but not all of us, many of us can feel that way at one time or another.
So when you're a kid with hemophilia, sorry to interrupt, I guess there's like hemophilia A and hemophilia B and different degrees of hemophilia. So when you're a kid, does this mean, you think of kids on the playground, roughhousing, stuff like that, pushing people down. When I think of hemophiliacs, I think of people who are, I think of, you don't want to touch them because you don't want to cause them to bleed and get a bruise or something like that. And so Was that a problem growing up, getting either pushed down or, just kids running into things? Was that a problem?
Absolutely, Scott. You really hit the nail on the head, because I don't know how they knew. I guess they knew because I would be sick sometimes, but many of the kids would ask me, what if you get cut? Will you bleed to death? Which is an uncommon fallacy. I mean, a common fallacy, but
Okay.
But you're right. If I got run over or tackled or pushed, or that could be dangerous for me. And
Right.
I certainly felt excluded and different. And especially as a little boy, everybody's playing football or baseball.
Kickball.
And yeah, kickball. And I certainly felt excluded, and sometimes was. Had to be, really, I think.
Right.
But yes, that's absolutely right. And I think my parents had to do a lot of preparation in me going to things, because they would, I think, tell the school or the other parents. And I probably have no idea what all they went through.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. But as I did start to get better, and about right when I graduated, and I had incredible support to do that, but they came out with a new blood clotting medicine. A lady in California, very famous hematology doctor, developed the factors, or identified the factors, and they started to be able to take them from other people's blood and put them into our blood.
So the factors are proteins, is that right? Or the protein that helps, am I right there? It either helps clotting or doesn't help clotting. I don't know which way it goes there.
It definitely helps clotting, and you have to have it to clot, like you have normal amounts or close to normal. And I also had almost none most of my life. And yes, that's exactly what it is. And this discovery was frankly miraculous at the time, because you finally had something you could do when you started to feel bleeding, and it's usually pain that initially signifies that. And it's truly changed the course of hemophiliacs' lives throughout since then, about 1985, I think. Maybe 83, something like that.
So you mentioned bleeding internally, and I guess it's very common for bleeds to happen in the joints. Why the joints, and why are they so susceptible to blood collection or blood collecting in the joints?
The way it was explained to me, and I think this is right, there's lots of, especially when you're a young man growing, and there's lots of capillaries and blood supply to a joint to help it grow and function and mature. And the joints have a lot of wear and tear on them. Again, especially in adolescence or puberty, or being a young man. And I think the joints have more space to bleed. A muscle will kind of stop, and a joint can literally fill up with blood if there's no mechanism to clot it. And that's what most of the challenges come from. Most of the acute pain, the chronic pain, and the health concerns.
So you said that it's usually men that have this and not women?
It's not totally a male disease as we once thought it was.
Okay.
And it's usually passed from the mother to the son. And that goes down through generations. Yes. And again, they've identified some women and other females that have certain forms of hemophilia, and even some that have, like I do, hemophilia like I have.
Oh, okay.
But primarily male. And back in the early years of my college. And again, I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be normal. I wanted to fit in, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And the blood clotting medicines that we had back then were so miraculous that we all wanted to take them all the time to prevent bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
And that's understandable. But in 83 and 84, I'll never forget this. I was watching the ABC Nightly News with, trying to remember the gentleman's name, it doesn't matter, but he started talking about a gay plague. And that was HIV. Back then, we didn't know what to call it.
Right.
But he listed four groups that were suffering from that and becoming infected. HIV, homosexuals, primarily men, prostitutes, IV drug abusers, and at the bottom was hemophiliacs. And in that, during those years, I even got a call that I had some tainted factor or some factor that got recalled because of a person that had HIV that donated. They would spin it down or put it in a big vat and spin it down, and you'd get blood from, or factor VIII from, I don't know how many, thousands of people. And I lost probably half the hemophiliac friends I had at that time, young men, older men, HIV, and it would kill them pretty quickly
because of their because of injecting tainted blood.
There you go. Actually, it's factor. It's a factor product. Yeah, that, well, it's made from blood.
Right.
And the HIV virus somehow survived to make it infected about 10,000 of us at least. And both my brother and I think they finally told us that we had a genetic reason that we didn't get it, as many others that didn't get it. But I don't know. It was such a challenging time to try to keep moving and keep studying and keep trying to live. And, you had to think about relationships, and very challenging for everybody, the medical community and me and everybody.
Right.
But I'll never forget that time. And it taught me valuable lessons. And as I continued to grow, I learned that things can get better. They kept developing new methods and new treatments and new, I even had both my hips replaced because they were so mangled from bleeding. And that would have never been possible, 30 years ago when I was born.
Mm-hmm.
So dramatic improvements along with very serious challenges and difficulties. And I guess I've just learned, I'm sure lots of us learn this, but if you'll just try to keep going, try to stay positive. I don't even know what that means, but I guess I do. Things can change, and change for the better, and often do. I was able to marry and had lots of wonderful life experiences, have a daughter, and yet I started to deal with an opioid addiction because I had been on since I was about 14, off and on, lots of opiates.
Thank you for joining the Scott Townsend Show. We'll be back right after this.
Pop's Daylight Donuts, man, they've got the best tasting donuts, sausage wraps, pastries in Northeast Oklahoma. And also, if you'll tell the staff there, hey, Scott Townsend said to give me a large spicy pig, they'll give you a free large spicy sausage wrap. But you have to tell them Scott Townsend sent you. So tell them, hey, Scott Townsend told me to tell you to give me a large spicy pig. So there's the offer. There's the call to action. So go to Pop's Daylight Donuts. Say hi to Mark for me. And go to Pop's Daylight Donuts and get you some. The other sponsor is Castafly Outdoor Adventures.
Adventure. That's where it begins. We look to create and document our moments in time while embracing the majestic wonder and beauty of the great outdoors. Our quest is to explore the back roads of the Ozarks, camping, fishing, and just getting lost. Refresh your spirit and join us on our next adventure.
Paul and his crew invite you to subscribe to the Castafly Outdoor Adventures YouTube channel. Since 14, you were, because of pain, I'm sure.
Primarily, I think. I think I might have some predisposition to that. I'm not sure. I don't know that we know enough yet about opiates. Certainly change your brain. That's the whole idea. When I was hurting so bad, it would just kind of knock you out, and or you didn't have to feel it as much. And as I grew, that was a battle too. That was a challenge, and again, seemed unfair. It's certainly not uncommon in hemophiliacs to deal with that. The majority of them don't, but many of us do. And it just, again, it felt so oppressive and so unfair. And yet, incredible positive things kept happening. And they continue to develop treatments, and they've developed such incredible HIV treatments since then. I have a few friends that are still around, hemophiliac friends, and others that I know with HIV. The antivirals have dramatically increased their quality and quantity of life. But the thing that, when I worked on this talk or presentation with a dear friend, there were a few times in my life when I've been told you're very, very sick, and you maybe you should get your affairs in order, particularly the older I got. And that provokes so many feelings. For many of us, that's different feelings, but I'll call it anxiety, for lack of a better word. And it kind of culminated in I started to have difficulty at about 55. I started to have difficulty breathing. By the way, I never thought I'd live to be 55. Yeah. And I went to have it checked out, and the hepatitis C that I got back in I'm sure it was the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. There was hepatitis A, B, and then hepatitis C, which they didn't know what to call back then, started to, or culminated in destroying or attacking my liver. I had been doing that probably since I was in my 30s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we didn't know enough about it back then. And I got to where I had pulmonary hypertension, which it's not that's just a weird side effect of the hepatitis C. But I'll never forget this gentleman, fine doctor, looking at me, and I didn't know I was anywhere near that sick.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know whether I appreciated he telling me or not. I'm not sure the way he said it was useful to me.
Good bedside manners or not good bedside manner?
It's interesting, though. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but he came to be a pretty important person in my life at one time. And I have a brief something that I feel like is kind of serendipity or something. But my wife, Sherry, she and I went to grade school together. And she remembers me being out sick or coming back to school on crutches or having difficulties, and she remembered that. She moved away, and when she moved back here, she looked on Facebook and couldn't believe I was still alive and contacted me. And I remember her distinctly in grade school. And she's a cute little redhead, and I remember her red hair. And we reconnected, and she has literally been a savior in my life. It almost feels like a godly connection for something.
I'm sure
it is. I believe so. I believe so. And I believe without her, I know I wouldn't be here. And I'll tell you why. That's at 55, I was told I needed a liver transplant to survive. And obviously I began to research and got on the internet and learned that several hemophiliacs throughout the world had to have liver transplants because their livers got so damaged from what we thought was an incredible treatment, infection from that clotting factor. And that's a whole life lesson in and of itself, that things have good and bad.
Right.
But,
two-edged sword.
Yeah, absolutely. A two-edged sword. And I went to a local Integris here in Oklahoma City and found an incredible group of people. One of the most talented surgeons and doctors I've ever met. And I got put on the list. But had it not been for Sherry, making sure I got to all my appointments, compliance is huge in transplant. And I was
Compliance, what does that mean?
doing what they ask you to do and tell you to do. Yeah.
Okay.
And they have good reason to tell you.
To stack the deck in your favor so that if you do get the transplant, that everything's going to go well.
That's correct, Scott. Organs are in this country in pretty short supply, and they don't just give them away.
Mm-hmm.
You got to earn them. Although it's a fundamental question of how sick you are, I believe, and other things. But I was sick, and I did have trouble making it to all my appointments on time and staying there the time I needed to have it done. Were it not for her selflessness, I don't think I would have been offered a liver. Not sure, but that's my suspicion. And I was on the list for about a year and a half. Again, flooded with emotions, and I deteriorated. I wasn't any kind of a husband, a person, a father. I didn't feel like I was, or a family member. And I'm sure I was maybe a month or two away from death. And I guess that's one thing I want to pass on briefly is just because the odds are against you, just because the doctors say you're very sick and you may not survive, or you may not make it, you don't have to believe that. And that's not always the case. They're not always right. And had I not surrounded myself with people that love me and that could care for me and that I could care for, I don't think I would have made it. And I got the call about a year and 2 months into waiting, and got to the hospital, got checked in.
I mean, how soon from the time you got your call to the time how much time was that there? Was they like, you'd be down here in 30 minutes, or what was that like?
They kind of prep you, Scott, on what to do when you get that call.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it was, let's see, I was at the hospital maybe 2 hours after I got the call.
Okay.
And I had to pack my bag. My wife was at work at the time. Somebody had to support us. And she took care of that. I don't know how she did, but she did. And she came up, she headed to the hospital, and I called my other family members, or they called people. And I was in surgery. It took a little while, but that's okay. It took an extra day or two. And those are certainly days filled with trepidation and fear and hope,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I was in surgery. And when I woke up, I was so angry, I think. And I shouldn't have been, but I was just angry because I was in so much pain and so scared and a bit confused, probably from medicines and other things. And
Right.
I didn't act right for a week or two, and kind of pissed some of the nurses off and some of the doctors. It was a very challenging time for me because I do remember it. But
So what
I mean,
would you do? I mean, how were you irritating everybody?
I was short-tempered and would begin screaming or criticizing, or where's my shot, or where's my medicine, or, you know, these people are trying to do the best they can in the ICU. And I couldn't get transferred out of the ICU as quick as I'd wanted, and I was frustrated about that. And it's strange, even though they've taken an organ out of you and put someone else's in you, I still had normal human, or for me, were normal human emotions.
Right.
And it was quite a learning experience and a challenging time.
Did they ever tell you, hey, you better listen up, you better straighten up and
fly
right, or we're gonna?
Absolutely. Well, they weren't going to take the liver back, but absolutely they told me that. I have theories as to why I acted that way, other than just being a jerk sometimes, but it doesn't matter now. But the most amazing thing is I woke up, and before, if I'd ever had surgery, like with my hips, I had to have constant blood clotting factor injected into my veins constantly for for like 10 days at one time to get
So
my
when you
hip.
say constantly, is that like once an hour or once every 2 hours or just a steady drip or what?
Steady drip. It's a steady drip of factor VIII. And for most hemophiliacs, it works. It works. But when I woke up from the liver surgery and I had been cut wide open, you know, I mean, it's like filleting a fish, I think. They have to get in there. And I didn't bleed. And I'd look down and see this huge incision. And I said, where's my factor VIII? You know, I'm going to bleed to death here. Do you not realize that? That's probably another reason why I was acting like a jerk. But this is truly even hard to explain today or describe properly. From the time they put that other person's liver in where mine had been, I started blood clotting normally. I didn't need another factor VIII infusion after that. And I haven't in 2.5 years. I don't even know how to describe it or give it justice and how incredible in my life it's been.
All your life, you've been wrapped up. Your personality, your identity has been wrapped up in being a hemophiliac for 50 some odd years.
Yes.
And then, is that right? And so now you're not. And it's almost like you don't know how to act. You know, I'm guessing. Is that right?
That's exactly right, Scott. You know, so many of us are ingrained by what we lived as a child or as a young adult or as an adult. And I have to say it's been freeing, but also I still have the damage that hemophilia did to my body, to my joints primarily, and the pain, and dealing with addiction every day. And But yeah, it took me 6 months to not think I was bleeding or needed a factor VIII infusion. And my brother would call me and he would say, "You haven't bled?" You know, he was still having to take factor VIII, and he's done a great job of managing his disease, but brought up all kinds of feelings between he and I. And it's been a real challenge. But again, I've talked to a few other hemophiliacs that have had this, and it's literally changed our lives in what I would call a miraculous way.
So is this common if a hemophiliac gets a liver transplant that the hemophilia goes away?
It happens every time.
Every time?
Every single time. Yeah, there may be other complications.
Right.
That, you know, liver transplant's a rather dramatic treatment and it's risky.
Mm-hmm.
But it happens every single time. And I can't explain it medically. I just know that most livers that's where the factor VIII has been learned to be made in the liver. At least that's what we know now. And due to a genetic little quirk in my DNA, mine didn't work right. And the one that I have, which I can't even describe my gratefulness to the donor and to their family, now works the way God intended it to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, or the creator, whatever you want to call it. But it happens. I don't know how many in the U.S. have been done, more than used to be, but it's still fairly uncommon for hemophiliacs to receive liver transplants. Someday I don't think it will be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they'll be growing them in a lab and picking in a new one when you're born and identified as having hemophilia. I hope that's the case. It'll probably bring up all kinds of new issues.
Right. Moral and ethical issues.
Financial, moral, ethical.
Right.
All kinds of stuff. Yeah. As it will for so many other treatable illnesses. And, you know, medical science is advancing so quick and so dramatically. I don't understand it or have enough knowledge in it, but it certainly has dramatically altered my life. I mean, for as many challenges I've had, I'm so grateful to be alive during this. I mean, I've only been alive 50 some years, and I've seen advance after advance after advance after advance. And it's been a miraculous journey. And I don't know what, fundamental message I have for that, but other than things can change for the better.
Are you glad you hung in there?
Most of the time, yeah. Most of the time. On days of when I don't feel good or bad pain or frustrated with life, as precious as life is, I'm sure glad I hung in there. I mean, we only get this shot. Life is precious. And I am grateful that I hung in there.
That's great.
And kept going. Thank you, Scott.
So what's life like now? New liver, no hemophilia, probably got a few side things to deal with because of the problems of hemophilia, but overall, looking in the rearview mirror, maybe what's life like now versus most of what you've lived?
Very different and very in a very simple way, wonderful. And it's taught me some very, very valuable lessons about what should be important in life. And I would say that that's our people in our lives, time, simple things. I certainly don't have the health challenges that I did, especially right before the transplant. And that's nice.
Mhm.
That's more than nice. That's life's still full of challenges. I suspect it will be till I check out.
Right. It's the same for
Um,
all of us.
Amen. You know, my story is really not that different from everybody else that's been alive, other than I've sure had lots of help.
For people who are listening, watching, either going through some kind of medical issue or have family members, friends, colleagues that are going through who knows what, you name it, it's probably happening, and under dire straits, dire circumstances, what advice would you give them, having been through what you've been through? What would you say to those folks that are just hanging in there?
You asked me that before this, and I've really thought about it. And sometimes the only advice is, other than one other thing I've thought of, is go with the flow. Go with knowing you're going to survive, thinking that, praying for that, if that's the universe's will, God's will, and getting lots of information. Sometimes I think we're overloaded with information in this day and age, but
Right.
there certainly were times for me that were, like you said, extremely dire. I know what that's like. There's no one easy answer for that, but love, family and friends, and good, solid medical help, which is sometimes hard to define, especially when you're in a crisis or really challenged mentally and physically. Keep seeking. Keep seeking. And the answer may come to you, or at least one answer at one time may come to you from many different sources.
When you say keep seeking, you're seeking what? Keep seeking what? And I don't mean to be grilling you here. I just that the thought just popped in my mind. So are you talking about seeking medical help? Are you talking about seeking spiritual help, or what? What should we be seeking, or to keep seeking?
The thing that comes to my mind is all of that. At one time or another, let me just give a quick example. Opiate addiction and other addictions. About the early 2000s, they came up with a new drug that really helped me. I didn't have a lot of success doing the abstinence route. I would just bleed and have pain sometimes, and felt like I needed something for that. But a drug called Suboxone came out then that they now use to treat opiate addiction. And I think for me, it was very useful. Sort of evened out the ups and downs, and it does treat pain. And that's been very useful. That's my point and I wouldn't have known that had I not went and talked to a couple people in that business, and that couple of wonderful doctors that battled their own. They had alcohol addictions, but knew how to treat this, some of the newest frontier medicine. And had I given up when I got so sick with my liver, which I sure felt like it certain days, if that had not been for Sherry, I probably would have, and Annie, my daughter. But I decided, hey, let me go to the transplant clinic and the unit. And I don't think it's failure to give up, but you sure don't have to. And there are avenues available to you, whether it's spiritual, medical, physical. Exercises helped me a lot at one point, swimming. Everything is the only way I can answer that, Scott, is everything. Right. It's such a fundamental, great question. It's different for all of us, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I appreciate you're not giving just one pat answer because, like you said, it is different for everybody. And so, there's not just one, well, here's what you do. You do A, B, C, and D, and there you go, So, yeah, it's you just
Not that simple.
Not that simple, right? Everybody's
No.
got a little bit different spin and take on the same kind of problems, I'm sure, or different
Absolutely.
problems.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for spending time with us, talking about this. I'm sure you've helped some people out there, helped me with the thought of, what would you do if things came down to the nitty gritty and it's, they're telling you it's time to check out and should you stick around? And it's just something about having stick-to-itiveness and just sometimes when all you can do is hang in there, you just hang in there, There's nothing more sexy about it or, nothing Hollywood about it at all. It's just sometimes you're just hanging. So really appreciate.
Summary. Thank you. That's a great summary.
I appreciate your story and your time, and thanks for the info. And that reminds me. So if someone wanted more information about hemophilia, or if they know someone who's a hemophiliac or a family member or whatever, where would they go? Or can they get in touch with you? Or is there a website they can go to get more information?
Absolutely, Scott. That's again, I hope this helps. There's a National Hemophilia Foundation. There's two other national organizations that one of them kind of arose out of when HIV hit the scene. There are all states have a hemophilia treatment center. It's a federally mandated program. And every state has a transplant center also. I want to let people know that. And they're welcome to contact me. I can give you some information, or I'm not sure how to do that. I haven't done that a lot, but we're trying to put together a website. So absolutely, there's places to go.
Any information that you give me, I'll put it in the show notes below, so someone can either see your email address or LinkedIn profile or whatever.
That'd be fine.
Yeah,
I'd like that.
And big shout out to Chris Zervis for referring you to the show today. He was generous enough to help line you and I up to do this interview. So big shout out to Chris for that.
Thanks, Chris.
So anyway, for Jim, appreciate it. For Jim Mueller, this is Scott Townsend. Thanks for joining the Scott Townsend Show. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.
The Scott Townsend Show is a Dietzo Man production. For more episodes, visit the Scott Townsend Show YouTube channel, listen on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.
The Scott Townsend Show.